Often they needed somebody who could take charge of things and keep the school under control, and that was George. They relied on him very much to do that. There are a few people who shared those years. All of us have had the opportunity of sharing some years with George. But there are three people that I'm going to call upon for a few comments today. And the first will be Brady Toohey. Brady started Seattle Prep in 1971. He's completing 21 years and is probably going to continue for many more of those years. So I asked Brady to come up first and share some of his reflections.
Well, I don't have to say to many of you that George is really a person of surprises. Somebody who delights us with new aspects of himself. He's a man who has chest and shoulders that could remove an engine block from a car, and yet he often drapes that chest and shoulders with a T-shirt that says Grampy on it. Names of all of his grandchildren. He's been most dedicated to the instruction of math. As happens to many of us, math is one of those subjects that makes a very bloody entrance. George is not one to abandon the effort, but with his gentleness and with his humor has stayed faithful to his students and made sure that they get that knowledge that he knows is there. Somewhat with the assistance of his water bottle, he occasionally squirts them with. Definitely not cruel punishment, but definitely unusual. And I think all of us have experienced the first floor McDonald Hall gridlock, with the freshman sprawl. And it's always a breathe a sigh of relief whenever I have to go down there and I can get behind George. And he goes down with his cane and with his voice, and the traffic jam breaks up and flips away, and I can get to my destination intact. I sometimes wonder what George would have done if he hadn't been Kathleen. Possibly would have been a Jesuit. Perhaps an odds maker permanently at Longacres. But he did meet Kathleen, and we're all the more blessed for it because of the wonderful family that they've given life to and that they've shared with us. A wonderful witness to what a really honest family life is. Just the very fact that so often the family comes back together from time to time to share celebrations is a real witness to that. And I think the values that come out of that George shares with us. I've often been kind of touched to go by his classroom, right at the beginning of a class, and everybody stands up, from bookworm to punk rocker, and says a prayer before class. And I'm impressed by that. And I think that those students are too. I think that's one of the things that they probably remember, besides the facts and the figures that they get from George. I think we could probably say that George is the seventh Jesuit on campus here. Good mathematician that he is, his spirituality begins with very, very simple principles, simple stories, but he goes into great conclusions. So George, now you're going to be free to tend to your cattle and hay up at Whitby. And if you don't sell your ultralights, they'll fly that around. Did you know that George flies an ultralight? That's one of those airplanes that the FAA can't regulate. He flies around Whitby every now and then. So another one of the surprises. I hope that we'll see you back. George has been trying to get me to put grades on the computer, and I have been very faithful. And he even formatted a disk for me, and I still haven't learned it yet. So, he says that he'll come back and help me. That's good. Just don't bring your water. God bless you. Thanks.
There was a student here from 1980 to 1983, we had George as a teacher, and that the student returned in 1988 to be here himself as a teacher. So Andy Hendricks will now come forward
Waiting 12 years in this revenge. I spent 2 years in George's classroom, and he was the first class on the first day into the halls of prep. And back then we didn't have the math entrance exam. We just went on the recommendations of the 8th grade teacher. The 8th grade teacher seemed to think that he had taught me some math. About 5 minutes into the school year, figured out he hadn't. George had told the class, well, we're just going to review these 7 field properties. You all know them. And myself and 2 other people come from the same grade school looked at each other and said, well, we know 3, so we've already failed the first test, we're in big trouble. George taught us not only math, but a lot of lessons in life. And perhaps one that sticks in my mind is taking responsibility for our own learning. Nobody's ever accused George of being an easy A. And you had to work, and you worked hard. And you had to take the responsibility to come in after school if you wanted to help. And because of that, I went from having a C- my first trimester when I entered the school, having an A when I left as a junior, and I feel that I still know the math today enough to help some students out. Brady already stole my remarks about the squirt bottle. There are sometimes in life you thank God that you were short. Junior year, I took Cal, and most of my friends didn't. And that offered me an opportunity to meet with new friends and experience other students. And it was really there that we were trying to do our best. We really pushed ourselves, and we really worked hard. And I can remember almost every Friday we used to sit on these tables, and there wouldn't be any talking. It was probably the easiest lunch day ever proctored, because we'd just sit there and we'd study for our math test that was coming up Friday afternoon. And then at the end of the year, we took his pre-Cal students out and we surveyed his farm. And now that he's retiring, we'll be able to put that information to use. I expect a little bit of a commission for that. When I returned, I noticed that I walked into George's room, and all of a sudden they had these formulas on their desk that we used to write on hand. I just don't understand. And lastly, I'd just like to say that I find a lot of George's style in my own teaching. He was a good role model, and he led by example and really pushed us to do as well as we could. And George, just to tell you how well you taught me, I could still spout off the quadratic equations. Negative b plus and minus radical b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Our final speaker on George's behalf is Denny Olson. Denny started at Seattle Prep in 1970 and is completing 22 years. So Denny, would you like to come forward?
Riley Martin was giving me a bad time for the way I dressed today, but I said there was reason for it. Number one, the jeans. The jeans are a symbol of the origin, the Ellensburg origin, George. The baying of the cows, and bawling of the cows in Ellensburg, the sweet smell of mown hay, and also kind of a return, because I think that's what you're going back to. It would be the good times. The sweater I'm wearing is the only artifact in my possession that's as old as my acquaintanceship and friendship with George. I received this sweater in November of 1970 when I was asked to be assistant coach of the basketball team, and I think that was a Jesuit generosity, because he knew I wasn't making enough money to feed my 4 kids. They said, here, we'll let you coach basketball, give me the sweater for free. I reminds me of the good times in those 22, 23 years that we've been together. And a few years ago, I gave a commencement address at which I kind of kidded George. And I think you probably remember, George. The story went something like this. When I first came here, I was intimidated by evaluation and grading. And of course, I went around talking to all of the old teachers saying, how do you do that? And I came to George, who was very generous in advice. And he said, well, what you do is you keep score of all the scores, then you add them up, and take an average and so forth. And then you just guess. and then I followed that up by saying, and then shortly after that advice, they made George head of the math department. But I really want to go back and reiterate that that's not the way it was. That's not true. It was a lie. It worked for the speech, but it wasn't true. George was extremely generous in advice. And it wasn't that he sought me out to give advice, but he was open anytime I had a question. And I had a lot of questions. I was constantly looking for, and it was in the area of evaluation I was most concerned. We spent many, many long study halls or open periods sitting, and I was questioning George, how do you go about doing that? How do you give justice to the student? And George was very generous with that. And I'm very, very happy to call George my mentor. As others have said, I can look back, if I've had any success in my teaching career in 22 years, George, a lot of it was due to you. He's been a friend and a counselor when in my different capacities in the school, as a coach, as an administrator. George was always available. Sometimes he came in on his own and offered advice, but nevertheless, he was always there to give advice. And I want to offer that appreciation. There are three areas that I want to talk about George as I remember him and will continue to remember him. Number one, he was a person of vocation. He is kind of an incarnate meaning. In other words, meaning in flesh. It's not an abstract, it's not something we gain out of data, but he kind of is an incarnate meaning. In other words, to meet George, you meet something about the truth and something about virtue. There's also vice there, of course, and also sinfulness. That's what makes it so fun, But his vocation as a teacher was unquestioned. Unquestioned. He loved his students, and I know a lot of those students from years and years ago, they loved him very much. He loved the subject, he was very proud of being a math teacher, and I think he made it challenging and also delightful. Second, as been mentioned before, is his marriage. The witness of the love between Kathleen and George was wonderful. And for someone like me who came in at age 28 with 4 young children and a young marriage, I was married about 6 years at that time, and 4 young children, to have someone around who was still raising a family and yet still had it going on at different stages, it was a wonderful experience again to have someone to talk to ask advice, and on just raising kids and getting along, finding out what it is that a husband can do when he is going long hours at school, as we all were in those days. There were lots of long days, and George, of course, came to the racetrack. But Kathleen, I think, has been a model too, and I don't want to talk about George without making that very clear. I testify myself that none of us in my marriage, I cannot talk about my life without talking about my wife. And I cannot see George without seeing Kathleen and vice versa. I see them in other occasions, but it is that unity, that love, a real symbol of a relationship that goes on and grows ever deeper. It's a great witness to all of us, and I want to thank them both for that witness. And finally, and I think the grounding thing is the sense of faith. Worst comes to worst, good following ill, ill following good, whatever it might be, George has always been a man of great faith. And what a wonderful opportunity it has been to be around that and to witness that and to grow from it. And George, God bless you for that. I wrote a little ditty myself. I'm going to try this. It may not work, but I'll try it. George, of the great voice and joyous laugh, the Irishman doing math and finding the Gaelic love of music and the pristine fall of pumpkins, measuring what imagination cannot hold. The discipline of theory and axiom in sheer logic, the good sense of a solution wrought from hard thinking. All in the swing of faith that God is having a good time with our trying to figure it all out. George, I want to finish with 4 lines from the Irish poet William Butler Yeats. What if I bade you leave the caverns of the mind? There is better exercise in sunlight and wind. God bless you. George, it's pretty clear that you have been a blessing and a gift, a grace to this community. And we believe we want you to remember us, and we'll start with something simple. These are some shirts, and they're extra large. I hope that they fit, and Kathleen, I'm sure, can wear one of those also. And we have another gift for you, which you can open and show to people, and then we'll do one more afterwards.
We were very pretty.
Just rip it.
Take your time, George. You don't have to be
Black box.
Calculator.
Oh my God. Oh, just that. Wow.
George, we'll have that engraved. It was going to take about 10 days. And so if I'll talk to you afterwards and we can get it engraved for you. So
Thank you.
you just need to be outside. George, finally, we have a Distinguished Service Award. And I'll show you this plaque. Mike McCloskey took some initiative in getting this done and got it back yesterday, so we're very grateful to Mike for this. And it says, Distinguished Service Award presented to George Meade in recognition of outstanding service to Seattle Preparatory School as teacher, coach, athletic director, and friend to all, and in recognition of outstanding witness in his professional and personal life to the values and ideals of Jesuit education and Seattle Preparatory School. June the 9th, 1992.
I didn't know what kind of day it was going to be this morning when I got up. I thought I could handle it. That's an ordinary day. It started out that way. Breakfast in the morning before I came to school. Just got thinking goodbye, kick the dog. And I said, well, heck, there's no problem here emotion-wise, so and I went to liturgy and Rich kind of, I don't know the way he got the words anyway. I said, this isn't going to be that easy a day with the emotions, and I am touched. I don't know, just it's been my life of prep, this kind of outpouring of care, concern, certainly sustained me. And heard said, mentioned here about the years various people have given to prep. And I've never felt that I gave to prep. It was a place where my life was nurtured. And I've just been blessed with a tremendous life here. I've had it any other way. It's been that way because of all the people. Again, I think of John State said where you had the street fading into the distance. And I think of all the people from way back. And I couldn't begin to name them all. We'll have another meeting today. Your meeting will get over it sometime, but and where I'm going, wherever it is, Kathy and myself tonight, I need to recognize God's blessing on us. But this institution, this place is not an institution of people. It's what it's been to our lives. How our spiritual life has been nourished. And that's really what it's all about. And again, I do have to name some of the Jesuit community. They're the ones that touched me. Been blessed by God. First of all, with his mother and his son going through life with him. And being made aware of that through the various, especially the morning liturgies that available there, was generously provided for us by the Jesuit community. I think of Rich retreats at times. Before he went, Rich was gone for a while on his tertianship. Before he went, he would come over to my room and spiritual guidance. I didn't go to him, he came to me. That was the spirit of it, I think. And about Edie, can't say, all the Jesuit community today. And I think of somebody else, which I had one of them also, Jose. He's anything you never needed, they was ever take care of. All the staff is tremendous. And then you were right, you mentioned it was Catherine and I, blessed with her. Could make it without a little emotion. There are all of you been special to me. There are some that I've had more to do with and have been especially special. Besides the Jesuits, I was mentioned to Sacred Tom. All of them have especially help out or take care of look out for me when I needed looking out for me. And I appreciate that. Catherine stopped by in the morning. Nice word, big smile. Donna, who I admire so much. The way you've done good life with each other. And the things we've been able to share. I just want to thank you all for all you've been doing. God bless you all.
That brings this part of our day to a conclusion. That Chris asked me to remind you that we should be over in room 211 at 12:30. That's 12:30, so please try to get there as soon as you can. Thank you very much.
Time.